Hello, everyone. So, I was trying to go back because I was going to do the Warren Zavala, the long excerpt of his deposition transcript, but I could not, I couldn't find it. There's just so much. It is there. I will find it. But I've come across this, and this is Michael Robbins. I was like, who's this guy? And then I saw that he was one of Lively's experts. So I found two deposition transcripts actually. One that has been submitted by Lively, which is slightly longer, and then a much shorter one, which is submitted by Wayfarer. And he has got an expert report as well. I will do that in a separate video because it's over 50 pages long. But I thought, do you know what? To wrap up all my deposition transcripts, because I think I've done pretty much everyone else's now. Let's get this out of the way, and then I'll go back to Warren Zabala, and then I can move on to other stuff like emails and text messages and, so on and so forth. And continue in my quest to get to the other side of this massive unsealed document. All right. So this is Michael Robbins. Zeldin, I'm pretty sure is on Wayfarer's side. Because Stephanie Rosa is the she's the objecting attorney here. So this looks like Wayfarer doing the questioning. So going in on page 47. Straight out the bat, the first thing right at the top is he mentions he wrote his report and then he shredded the notes. What? Shredded the notes. I will say that really strikes me as odd that we are starting out like that, right? Firstly, because this guy is actually a qualified attorney. He no longer practices. This is all in his report, actually. He no longer practices, but he has previously practiced as an attorney. Not only that, right? Because the other explanation is, oh well, maybe this is his first, first time he's ever appeared as an expert witness. But actually, no. According to his report, he's been retained as an expert on over 750 occasions. And he has testified as an expert witness in over 100 trials over the span of 27 years. This guy knows what he's doing. He's not, a newbie to this. I can't believe he shredded his notes. Okay. So Zeldin asks, were you told to preserve those notes? No. Did you understand that you had an obligation to preserve those notes? Nope. Just sounds like he doesn't give a shit. Do you know if Wayfarer's expert done this, right? And let's remember, there's already a pending motion for spoliation sanctions. Right? That's how Lively would have reacted to this. Oh my God, sanctions. But this guy, Lively's expert, is like casually, no, I didn't. I shredded them. There was no obligation. No one told me. So, and the thing is, right, is when you read that in itself, right, that is one thing. But when you compare it to, I haven't read the deposition transcript, but I have read his report. And he is, by his own admission, his own words, he's been retained as an expert witness 750 times and testified in over 100 trials as an expert witness over a span of close to 30 years. So, and he's a licensed attorney. It's just nuts. I can't even believe we'd started like this. Okay, Rosa, belated objection. Zeldin, where in your report does it reflect anything that Miss Ricard told you? It doesn't specifically refer to her, but I can tell you, if you wish, what we discussed and how that impacted my views. Go ahead. So one thing that we discussed was the birthing scene. I had looked at the birthing scene before that as well. My view of the birthing scene was that it involved intimacy such that there should have been a nudity rider and a closed set. She said the same thing. I don't remember exactly what words she said, but her view was the same. There's a lot to unpack already, and he continues his answer. I will go into that, but he then pivots into the dance scene. So I wish that someone from Wayfarer in these kind of depositions, this guy, any other experts opining on the birthing scene, the intimacy coordinator, so on and so forth, people who were, like, oh yeah, this scene, it should have required a nudity rider. I would love to have seen Wayfarer push back and go, were you aware that Miss Lively was provided with a SAG-AFTRA compliant nudity rider, which she failed to sign? I suspect they're saving that for trial. That's my guess. Is they're not divulging that. They'll just wait for this guy to go on trial, testify, and said, "Oh yeah, should have had a nudity rider," and then they'll be like, "A boom! Here's the evidence that she was provided with a nudity rider that she failed to sign, much like her other contracts." That's where I think they'll go with this. Also, it was a close set. Someone clearly didn't pass that information on. This guy did not get the memo, or he shredded it. I'm not sure which, but these people keep referring to, oh, it should have been a nudity rider, should have been close set, but actually those things were in place. They were in full control of Blake Lively. Possibly, there's an argument to say maybe the close set part wasn't, but it was closed. But the nudity rider bit was in total control of Blake Lively. But also the birth. I shouldn't have been a nudity rider for that. God. So let's continue. Okay, so he goes on to the dancing scene. With respect to the dancing scene, I looked at the dancing scene several times. My thoughts were that Mr. Baldoni was trying to kiss Miss Lively, that she was avoiding the kiss, but staying within character for the most part, doing so, and Miss Ricard said the same thing. I mean, there is video footage where he says to Lively, where Justin Baldoni says to Lively, I'm going to look like I attempt to kiss you. And she's like, great. So, again, I'm sure come trial, he would be at that point, played that video and go, and how does that affect your opinion? That's what I'm anticipating will be the response. Of course, he's not done. He's having a ramble, so let's keep going. More importantly, I knew about production companies establishing definitions of intimacy so that they could establish protocols, which then would inform them as to when to bring in an intimacy coordinator, when to ensure that there was a nudity rider, and when to have a closed set. But I hadn't focused on that issue in this case. I just didn't see anything indicating that they had or didn't have definitions. She said they didn't. Assuming she's correct, then that caused me to say, well, then these other things should have happened and didn't happen. So that was primarily how she impacted my opinion to cause me to focus on the lack of definitions. Okay, so we're gonna now learn who this Ricard is, because I didn't have a clue. Zeldin asks, okay, let's go backwards. Laura Ricard is a choreographer, actor, teacher, intimacy choreographer, intimacy coordinator, and a founding member and head faculty of theatre intimacy. That's located in North Carolina, right? Rosa objects. And then he says, I don't remember all those, and then it cuts off. And then we get to a point then where he's sort of answering a question. He says, "I'm aware of those facts, yes." And then Zeldin asks, "And you're also aware that filming stopped on June 14th, 2023, due to the strikes by the Writers Guild and SAG-AFTRA?" Correct. Above the line strikes. And then the filming. There was a hiatus in filming and it did not start up again until January 5th, 2024 and concluded on February 9th, 2024. Correct? Yes. All right. So there's two phases of the film. Phase 1 that occurred in 2023 and ended in June of 2023, and the other in 2024, and that was phase 2. That's my understanding. All right. Do you agree that none of the Lively's intimate scenes were rehearsed or filmed during phase 1 of production? Rosa objects. He says, "I disagree." Hello, everyone. So I was going to do the longer version of the Warren Zavala deposition transcript, but I can't remember where I put it at the moment, and there's so much to get through for all these unsealed documents. It is that I just can't kind of put my finger on it quickly. So I have come across this. So there's a couple of deposition transcripts. There's a short one, and then there's a bit of a longer one. Of a guy called Michael Robbins. So I've had a look into him. Like I was like, oh, who's this guy? He's one of the Lively experts, seemingly. I've read his report, and I'll do a separate video on that. But I found his deposition transcripts. Now I haven't gone through it in any detail yet, but I thought, well, do you know what? If I get to these now, then we can wrap up the deposition transcripts once I've done the Warren Zavala one as well. And then I can start moving on and, starting to see the light at the end of this long, dark tunnel that is all the unsealed documents. So, yeah, let's proceed with that. Let's do this deposition transcript. And so this is the longer version. This is the one Lively submitted. I've got a much shorter version as well, which is Wayfarer's exhibit. And then I will do I'll do a separate video on his report, which I found, how can I put it, fascinating. I think this is the guy that Sony took a objection to, because I remember in their motion for continued sealing, they were, seemed quite pissed off with Lively, one of the Lively experts anyway, and I think it's this guy, for something that, like, expressing an opinion about Sony. So, well, maybe, I don't know, hopefully there'll be something in this that will tell us why Sony were upset. But let's proceed. Where are we? Okay, yep. So Michael Robbins. All right, so we're starting on, where are we starting on? Page 47. Zeldin is one of the Wayfarer attorneys, so she is doing the questioning. Rosa does the objections. That is the Lively attorney. So we're kind of halfway through an answer. I wrote my report and I shredded the notes. He wrote his report and then he shredded the notes. Wow, we're hitting the ground running here. Okay, so because I have actually read his report, there's quite a bit to unpack there. Firstly, this guy is an attorney. He doesn't practice anymore, but he is an attorney. So I suppose the next question would be well, has he ever testified? Has he ever, been retained as an expert witness? And the answer to that, according to, again, his report, where under the qualifications section, he actually makes reference to the fact that he has been retained as an expert on over 750 occasions. He also says that he has testified as an expert witness in over 100 trials across 27 years, I think it was. It was close to 30 years. That's absolutely crazy. That's absolutely crazy. So there's no argument that he was a novice or a newbie at this. That this guy actually should have known better. And it's frustrating when you sit and you remember that Lively has got motions for spoliation sanctions sitting pending because she believes, with very little evidence, that Wayfarer, all the Wayfarer parties deleted Signal chats deliberately. This guy is quite literally confessing to the fact that he shredded the notes that he made that went into his report. Oh my goodness. Okay. Right, well, I mean, that is an issue. That's an issue. Okay. So Zeldin then asks, were you told to preserve those notes? No. Did you understand that you had an obligation to preserve those notes? Nope. Wow, he strikes me as someone who's quite rude. I think somebody said something like they didn't say rude, but it's like they didn't like the sound of this guy. Okay. Rosa, belated objection. Selden, where in your report does it reflect anything that Miss Ricard told you? I have no idea who Miss Ricard is, so I hope we're going to learn that. He says it doesn't specifically refer to her, but I can tell you, if you wish, what we discussed and how that impacted my views. Go ahead. So one thing that we discussed was the birthing scene. I had looked at the birthing scene before that as well. My view of the birthing scene was that it involved intimacy such that there should have been a nudity rider and closed set. She said the same thing. I don't remember exactly what word she said, but her view was the same. Okay, so and he's going to pivot now into the dance, talking about the dance scene. So I'm going to just quickly comment a few things here on the birth scene specifically. I've noticed that Wayfarer haven't brought up the fact that actually, like there's all these experts refer to this scene and they're like, well, there should have been a nudity rider. The intimacy coordinator does the same thing. And I think in this case, right, I don't foresee Wayfarer then clapping back and going, well, hold on a minute. Actually, Blake Lively was provided with a SAG-AFTRA compliant nudity rider. She just didn't sign it. Like the rest of her contracts, she did not sign it. I think that Wayfarer will reserve that until the trial, because he will probably repeat this testimony on trial in front of the jury. And then they will bring out their evidence, I expect, in cross-examination to say, how does this affect your opinion? Something to that effect. And also the closed set. We have seen the call sheets. Yeah, the set was closed. It was a closed set, pretty much, as standard. So the nudity rider, though, it's hard to believe that at this point, with all the evidence, that the closed set was not in Blake Lively's control, but the nudity rider sure as hell was, and she didn't sign it. She had it, she was pressed for it and chased for it, and she did not sign it until she returned following phase 2. So there's that. Then he goes on to the dancing scene. So let's continue. With respect to the dancing scene, I had looked at the dancing scene several times. My thoughts were that Mr. Baldoni was trying to kiss Miss Lively, that she was avoiding the kiss but staying within character for the most part doing so. And Miss Ricard said the same thing. There is video footage of Justin Baldoni specifically saying to Blake Lively, I'm going to look like I attempt to kiss you. and Blake Lively says something along the lines of great, it's just kind of, agreeable to it, not like a great, groaning great, as in, "Ugh, I really don't want that." It was more like a great, as in, that sounds like a great idea. She probably wrote the scene, like she wrote the birthing scene. So again, at trial, I'm kind of expecting that he will testify this. Wayfarer will play that video where that audio is there, and you can hear that dialogue between them, where they're discussing the quote unquote attempted kiss, and Lively is not raising any objection to it. If anything, she seems quite agreeable, and I'm expecting them to say, "And how does this affect your opinion?" He continues, "More importantly, I knew about production companies establishing definitions of intimacy so that they could establish protocols, which then would inform them as to when to bring in an intimacy coordinator, when to ensure that there was a nudity rider, and when to have a close set. But I hadn't focused on that issue in this case. I just didn't see anything indicating that they had or didn't have definitions." She said they didn't. Assuming she's correct, that then caused me to say, well, then these other things should have happened and didn't happen. So that was primarily how she impacted my opinion to cause me to focus on the lack of definitions. And then he's asked, okay, let's go backwards. Laura, okay, so we're going to learn who Laura Ricard is. Great, because I have no idea. Laura Ricard is a director, actor, teacher, intimacy choreographer, intimacy coordinator, and a founding member and head faculty of theatre intimacy education. That's located in North Carolina, right? Rose objects. He begins to say, "I don't remember all those," and then we cut to a different page. He's answering, "I'm aware of those facts, yes." Question. And you're also aware that filming stopped on June 14th, 2023 due to the strikes by the Writers Guild and by SAG-AFTRA. Correct, above the line strikes. And then the filming. There was a hiatus in filming and it did not start up again until January 5th, 2024 and concluded on February 9th, 2024, correct? Yes. Alright, so there's two phases of the film. Phase 1 that occurred in 2023 and ended in June of 2023, and the other in 2024. And that was phase 2? That's my understanding. Alright, do you agree that none of the Lively's intimate scenes were rehearsed or filmed during phase 1 of production? Rosa objects. Witness, I disagree. Do you know how SAG-AFTRA defines intimate scenes? To the extent there is a definition, yes. What is a definition by SAG-AFTRA? So nudity, simulated sex, hyperexposure, and other intimate scenes. Isn't it just nudity or simulated sex? No. What is the third thing that you think is in there? It is in there. Okay. Hyperexposure. What the fuck is hyperexposure? I'm glad she asks, by the way. Hyperexposure. What does that mean? There is no specific definition, which is why a studio or production company needs to be specific for the reasons I've described. What? There's no specific definition, but it sounds like he's about to give a specific definition, which doesn't exist. But it means a situation where the actor is pulled into a vulnerable situation, not necessarily involving nudity, though it could, but involving something sexual to some degree. Okay. What were the intimate scenes that were filmed in phase 1 of production? I didn't say there were scenes, but there was one scene. Oh my god. Oh, he's just been standoffish for the sake of it now. One scene. What was the scene that you believe was intimate in phase 1? The birthing scene. Alright. Can we just... How the fuck do you film a birthing scene without some kind of, the suggestion that the the actress playing the part is playing the role of a person who is not clothed from the waist down? You know, I have 5 children. I have more children than Lively. How do you film a scene where the character gives birth without, implying not actually being nude from the waist down, but implying to the audience that the woman is naked from the waist down? Because that's the reality of giving birth. Jesus. Right, okay. I mean, Blake Lively was wearing shorts. We've all seen that. Yeah, we've all seen it. She was not literally fucking nude. Oh, right. Okay, and then he's asked, why do you believe it was intimate if there was no definition of intimate? 2 reasons. I'll just make sure this continues. Yes, it does. 2 reasons. Reason number 1 is because, according to Miss Talbot, so that's obviously the intimacy coordinator on It Ends With Us, there was profile nudity, which she said an actor could consider to be nudity. So that was an early part of her deposition. And emphasis on the words an actor could consider. So it's obviously in Blake Lively's interest for her to make the decision to consider it nude, even though she's not. And he continues, and in the later part of her deposition, she said there was nudity in the scene, and that would mean that an intimacy coordinator would get involved. So that is one reason. Both comments that Miss Fromholtz ignores. Fromholtz must be Wayfarer's kind of opposition to him, expert witness. And then, secondly, so then, Zeldin cuts him off. So I'm going to ask you, please, to not comment on Miss Fromholtz's report until and unless I ask you about it. All right? And then he gets, oh my God. And if I feel like I should do it, I will do it. And you shouldn't be stopping me in the middle of a question. But if you feel like you're going to do it, do it. Oh my God. Rosa, agreed. Objection. He sounds insufferable. Zeldin, if I ask a question, answer the question. Can I continue with my answer? Yes. And secondly, in my opinion, there was hyperexposure. And the reason I say that is because if you look at a scene, which I have, Miss Lively is laying on an examination table. The guy does not even... What woman gives birth on a fucking examination table? This is an expert. He's expert enough that he can say that the birth scene is intimate and sexual in nature, required a nudity rider, but doesn't know that Lively didn't sign said nudity rider, requires a closed set, but has no idea that the set was closed. But he's also, stating here that Lively's character would have given birth, realistically, on an examination table. What the fuck? Alright, we jump into a different page. Thank God, because that was frying my brain. Alright, so it looks like he's in the middle of one of his no, Zeldin's in the middle of a question, so we're kind of coming in halfway through. Ever testified that it was necessary to conduct an investigation when a witness was, strike that, when an actor and director called his co-actress, the person that he was directing, sexy in her costume? Rosa, objection. Witness, I have no idea. Okay. Zeldin, let's look at page 3 of your report, if you would. Sure. There's a section called Policies and Procedures. Do you see that? I do. And you begin by talking about Sony. Oh, okay, so we're about to find out why Sony were pissed. Awesome. Sorry, I said Zoni then. It's because her name's Zeldin, so like my brain is just crossing over there somewhere. And you begin talking about Sony. Yes. Why are you discussing Sony in this report? Because my view was that Sony didn't do what the policy said they should do. So are you intending to opine that Sony did not follow its practices and did not conduct an investigation which it should have conducted in this case? Yes. So says my report as well. Oh my god. This guy is just so hostile. It's unnecessary. Then go through Sony's policy language, and first you state that, and then she reads, all harassment complaints must be reported to the HR department or other departments. He says, show me where you are, please. Then Zeldin says, for example, second paragraph under policies and procedures. He says, oh, so I'm just quoting the policy. Right? Understood. Okay. And the question is, where in the policy does it say what a harassment complaint is? Rosa objects. He says, I don't think it defines harassment in the policy, in the Sony, what harassment complaint is in the Sony policy. Okay. Does Wayfarer policy define what a harassment complaint is? It defines harassment. Does it define what a harassment complaint is? And then they go to another page then. He's in the middle of an answer, so we'll just pick up from there. His or her findings, then that means the studio knows what to do as a result of the investigation. So then they have to take disciplinary or remedial action, which is what their policy says as well. And that varies according to what the investigator finds. So if you don't know what is appropriate until you conduct the investigation. Selden, and I've asked you to assume that the investigation found that the director was saying that about her personally, and there was therefore a violation of the policy. What would be appropriate remedial action under those circumstances? Objection. Witness. So I have two things to say about that. Thing number one is that is not what you had asked me. What? Thing number one is that is not what you had asked. And thing number two is I haven't been asked to give an opinion as to what is or isn't appropriate remedial action. I have been asked to give an opinion as to what kinds of remedial action exist, but not specifically what appropriate action was in a particular circumstance. What remedial actions exist? So one thing is to take actions to stop the harassment from occurring, assuming that the investigator determines that harassment did occur. If the investigator determines that harassment occurred, then disciplinary action with respect to the people who violated the policy, either by conducting the harassment themselves, committing the harassment themselves, or alternatively by otherwise not following the policy. For example, Wayfarer's policy said that reported incidents that incidents about which a supervisor was made aware had to be reported so that it could be investigated. So if supervisors knew about possible harassment violations and didn't report it, that's also a violation. There should be some kind of discipline. The company's own policy talks about termination as a type of discipline. Jesus, he's going straight to the most severe, action possible. Termination. The company's own policy talks about termination as a type of discipline. That aside from that, you want to take other remedial actions, especially if the investigator determined that harassment had occurred. So, for example, you would say, do our employees understand what harassment is and isn't? And do the supervisors understand their obligation under the policy to report the allegations? Have we sufficiently distributed the policy to our employees so that they know about that. And if it's unclear, which it was, then we should redistribute the policy. And also we should write the policy in a way that's consistent with our own procedure, with what our own procedures are, which their policy wasn't. Additionally, maybe do training again if the investigator concluded that people didn't understand their obligations or didn't understand what harassment is. So there's a variety of things you can do. Just a quick side note, he's clearly not going to say, well, in the first instance, issue an apology, and if it's accepted and the other person continues and moves on and, seems to be comfortable and happy going forward, then that's the end of the matter. Like, as a first line, offer an apology. He's not mentioned that. Justin Baldoni did that. And they moved into phase 2 with no problem. But he is not pointing out that, we don't have to go to far ends of the earth. Like, yes, the retraining and making sure everything is distributed to everyone in the company is one side of the coin. But in terms of punishment for the actual harassers, the actual punishment, the only thing he's talked about is termination. So we're talking about terminating the co-founders from their own company. I mean, that's not viable. Jamie Heath, in theory, could have been terminated, but who's terminating Steve Sarowitz and Justin Baldoni? But I'm struggling with this guy because he's gone straight for the nuclear option rather than a gradual step-by-step approach. Well, on the first occasion, offer an apology. If it happens again, maybe we look at other situations where we replace the director, we replace the actor, so on and so forth, or even just any of the suggestions that Lively put forward in her 17-point list of demands. And we know that's for the PGA benefit, but still, in Lively's mind, she suggested all of those things, allegedly, to keep the safe set, but he is not going through any of these at all. It's like straightforward terminate. And I'm struggling with this guy for that reason. I don't know. What do you guys think? We continue. Question from Zeldin. Under the circumstances that I outlined, the director is calling the actress. Under the circumstances that I outlined, the director calling the actress sexy while she was in her costume. What would be the appropriate remedial actions? You're not going to fire him for that, right? Exactly. Rosa, objection, form and scope. Witness, yeah, I wasn't asked to form an opinion about what remedial action should be taken in a particular situation. And that's going to be a bit of a problem because he's sitting there going, he's opining on what remedial actions there are available. But he's not actually saying, in this case, they should have done this, or they should have done that. That's going to be a bit of a problem, I think, as an expert witness for Lively side. Zeldin. She starts to ask another question, but he continues. But there are a variety that are available. And if you find someone harassed, then you normally would discipline in some way. Yeah, but what way? Like, what does that look like? Okay. Do you intend to offer an opinion that Sony failed to follow its own policies? Yes, same answer as before. Are you offering an opinion on the adequacy of Sony's policies? No. Do you intend to offer an opinion that Wayfarer failed to follow Sony's policies? No. You agree that Wayfarer had a set of industry standard policies and procedures in place to prevent harassment, discrimination, and retaliation? Then there's an objection. Zeldin, correct? Rosa, sorry. And then the witness says, I'm sorry, I missed one word, and so if you wouldn't mind repeating. Zeldin, would you agree that Wayfarer had a set of industry standard policies and procedures in place to prevent harassment, discrimination, and retaliation? Rosa objects. The witness, I do not agree with that. Okay. Did What don't you agree with? So many things. Oh my God, the dramatics. First, one of the things that the policy said was that if the supervisors or managers became aware of a possible violation of the policy, that they had to report it to human resources and that an investigation should be conducted. So, focusing on the report to human resources, Mr. Heath testified that he never asked the person who did human resources for the studio to be involved with the film, and that there was no human resources department or anyone who was handling the film other than the AD. I assume he meant first AD, but I'm not sure. And let's remember, after phase one, after when the first phase where all the quote unquote harassment took place, the first AD was Julie Bloom. Blake Lively had her fired and replaced for phase two. Coincidence? I'm not so sure. But that would, according to this guy, that's the person that all, complaints and concerns should be raised to. Let's also not forget that there was a hotline that on the call sheets. And let's also not forget Blake Lively knew damn well how to contact HR because she did, or her attorney. She had attorneys, by the way, in this, who were negotiating her contract, but she couldn't go to her attorneys to contact HR. The same people that she negotiated a contract with. That was impossible. Anyway, he continues. And Miss Sachs, who was a producer. Right, so Miss Sachs was available. So having a policy that says supervisors should report to HR when HR doesn't exist is not consistent with standard practices in the industry. This pisses me off, right? Because he's conflating two things, right? I'm going to try and make this simple, but imagine in your mind, yeah, he is talking about the subpar, right? I'm just kind of taking his quote here, right? The subpar HR policies and procedures that he's talking about here, which have been talked about through every deposition, are Wayfarer's HR policy, procedures, etc., right? For Wayfarer as a company. But he's saying, well, you have this policy, right? But it ends with us didn't HR had a Wayfarer had a HR department. He's saying, well, the film, the actual company set up for the film, It Ends With Us movie, did not have a dedicated HR department. But then they're all relying on Wayfarer's policies then and saying, well, yeah, but Wayfarer's policies define harassment, but Wayfarer, but It Ends With Us didn't have a HR. No one's actually asked the question, did It Ends With Us movie have its own policies and procedures? They're all too focused on Wayfarer's policies and procedures. Why? Because it's got such a broad definition of harassment, right? That it suits their narrative, suits the Lively side's narrative. Like, oh my God, look, you've included everything. If he even so much as farts in her direction, it's sexual harassment. And they are very, very broad. And I don't think it. Whilst I appreciate what Wayfarer were trying to do, I think it did kind of leave them open to being kind of taken advantage of here, which is what's happened, right? But they are well aware, it's quite clear from this guy's comment here, right, that the actual employer or the contracting body was It Ends With Us movie. It was a company in its own right. And he's sitting here moaning that, well, there was no HR for anyone to report anything to. I haven't seen one person, not this guy, not Lively, not Slate, no one, not Isabella Farah, no one say, well, yeah, we didn't see the HR procedures, right? We've seen all that, but no, they're all talking like, so Lively's lawyers keep referring to Wayfarer's HR policies, but it wouldn't be Wayfarer's. It would be It Ends With Us movies. It's something I've kind of it really annoys me because they really talk in depth and they hammered Jamie Heath and Justin Baldoni and Steve Sarowitz on Wayfair's policies. Well, your policy says this, your policy says that. You're not following the policy. But the policy that they're being accused of not following is Wayfarers. So why did Lively knows where Wayfarer's HR is? Why did she not contact them if she had concerns? Well, I can speculate that I don't believe she had concerns, but also it should have been It Ends With Us movie, surely, because she did not contract with Wayfarer. Just a side thought I have. But it annoys me when you see like, you know, the kind of gymnastics going on here, like, oh well, the movie did not have a HR department, but also, the Wayfarer policy book defines discrimination as this. It's like you're trying to chop and change between two separate companies, and you're picking the bits that suit you, and that annoys me. Okay, he does continue. This looks like one of his very long. Good God. We're going for quite a while with this guy. He likes to chat, doesn't he? Okay. Similarly, the policy said that employees who felt that the policy had been violated should either report to their supervisor or any member of management or to HR, a department that did not exist. And that's what I mean. Like, he cannot be talking about Wayfarer because there were 2 members of staff in Wayfarer's HR. The fact that they worked remotely is neither here nor there. Especially post-pandemic, we're in a world where, people work remotely a lot now, especially these kind of, desk jobs and things. It makes perfect sense that they're not in an office particularly as well, especially in this industry, because this is a production company, right? So if they are dealing with, say, actors and actresses on sets, well, the sets move around all the time. This movie alone was filmed in New Jersey, and it was filmed in California. There were supposed to be parts that should have been filmed in Las Vegas, and it was originally set to be filmed in Boston. So, what benefit is it for can't get her name right, Cynthia Barnes Slater to be sat in an office in California? How does that make her more accessible? The arguments are just so stupid and ridiculous. She was definitely contactable by email, and I haven't seen any evidence that anyone actually tried to send her an email. It's fair game if they say, well, we sent, 3, 5 emails across this period of time, all within a reasonable period of time, and we didn't get any responses. At least they can come to this table and say, well, we tried to contact her, but we didn't get a response. But I've seen no evidence that anyone's actually tried to contact her, whether it be Blake Lively or one of the many, many, many people that represent her, and that's what sets her apart from, your average individual, like a secretary who works in an office with a sleazy boss. Blake Lively has well over a dozen staff who can speak up on her behalf, and most women don't. It's just, the more I get into this, right, the more annoyed I'm getting now. But yeah, so he has to be talking. If he is stating, "Oh, the HR department does not exist," he has to be talking about It Ends With Us movie, the company, not Wayfarer. He continues. I'm sorry. I know I keep kind of stopping and starting, but there is so much to say about things that he says, and I want to say it whilst it's fresh in my mind without reading a long piece and then going back, and it just keeps me kind of on my point, I guess. He continues, it's not consistent with standard practices. You tell people to report to people or departments that exist, not ones that don't exist. Also, having a policy is just having words. Oh, God. You need to do more than just have words. You need to distribute the policy. Standard practice in the industry and otherwise is to distribute harassment policies and retaliation policies. Mr. Heath said, I don't know if the casting crew were given a copy of the policy. Miss Lively said she never got any resources in terms of how to raise a complaint. The question should have been asked, but wasn't. Well, did you get the policy? But if you didn't get the resources, then presumably she didn't get the policy. Mr. Baldoni, who is one of the people being accused of harassment, said, I don't think I ever saw that policy before. Well, standard practice is to distribute the policy. So that's also not consistent with standard practices. And more than anything else, standard practice is not just to have a policy sitting there, much less one that wasn't distributed or at least may not have been, but actually do what the policy says. The policy says all reported allegations will be investigated, and they didn't. Oh, well, I just need to take a second, a moment of silence. Okay, Zaldin, there was a policy, a written policy, correct? Sorry, yes, there was a written policy. All right. And Wayfarer had a HR department with dedicated staff, yes or no? Objection. Wayfarer had a HR department, but I've already explained that the problem what the problem was. And dedicated staff, Mr. Heath only talked about one person, but maybe there was more than one. All right, but there was at least one person with a HR department at Wayfarer, correct? It's a yes or no. Objection. I don't know if there was a department. There was a person who did HR services, which just completely contradicts everything he said about there not being a department. The department does not exist. This guy is a complete tosser. Okay, Zeldin. Prior to filming It Ends With Us movie, prior to filming that, the movie itself held anti-discrimination training administrated by a law firm that you respect, correct? A law firm you respect. Objection. Oh, please tell me this. Oh, it doesn't continue. I want to know what he said. Okay, so we've skipped pages, much to my disappointment, to another question being asked by Zelda. So your opinions are summarized on the first and second pages of your report. Is that right? Not my opinions about Miss Promholz's opinions, because obviously they didn't exist before I wrote the report. Okay, but your opinion, let's just stick with the report and we'll talk about Miss Promholz at the end. Okay? Sure, yeah. With respect to your report, there you basically offer 3 opinions. Is that right? Objection? Yes. Okay. And your first opinion is that, and then she reads, defendants violated standard practices in their own policies by failing to investigate harassment and retaliation allegations, correct? Yes. And what were the harassment and retaliation allegations that they failed to investigate? Then he answers, so on May 23rd, we had the incident we talked about earlier relating to Mr. Baldoni making the sexy and hot comments and Miss Slate's response to that. Then his joke in response to that. That's the first one. Interesting, because before that happened, and I did this yesterday in my video, where I literally pulled up on Blake Lively's original complaint. I did a video about, it was called the Blake Lively's bra dilemma. It's literally less than a 10-minute video, right? I actually pull up the page where the hot and sexy bit part goes into her original complaint and highlighted it. The first thing that actually happened was the low-cut dress that she was wearing. Her jacket was unbuttoned and it popped open when she bent down. Then later in the day, the sexy and hot comments happened. So by Lively's timeline, this was not the first thing, but this guy is saying, well, the first thing is this. Anyway, just an observation. And they had a conversation that they say with him, Miss Late and Miss Lively, and they had a conversation, they say, with him, Miss Late and Miss Lively, about the impropriety of making statements like that. So that's the first one. Okay. Shall I keep going? Yes, please. I just want you to listen, please. Sure. So then on May 26th, Miss Lively went to Miss Giannetti and talked about her concerns. There was a slight disagreement about what was discussed, but it appears that she discussed the trailer incident, the birthing incident. Miss Giannetti did not record. Yeah, because wasn't the trailer incident before all of that as well? Before that bar scene? Miss Giannetti did not recall whether she talked about any comments made by Mr. Baldoni, but the timeline that was produced by the company shows that Miss Giannetti told Mr. Baldoni about the sexy comments. So it appears that she did say that to Miss Giannetti. Otherwise, Miss Giannetti wouldn't know what to say that to Mr. Baldoni. So then in late May, Miss Slate went to Miss Giannetti, talked to her about her concerns, said there was a problem with the atmosphere on set as a result of the concerns, and Miss Lively had concerns as well. And Miss Giannetti then spoke to Mr. Baldoni about that. Miss Slate also went to Miss Sachs, and about the same thing she had told Miss Giannetti. Miss Sachs then says she went to Mr. Baldoni and to Mr. Heath. Mr. Baldoni says yes, she came to me, and basically she mentioned her own, Miss Slate's own discomfort about the sexy comment that he had made to her. Miss Sachs said that she went to Mr. Heath, but there is a dispute about what was said. Miss Sachs said she told Mr. Heath basically the same thing she told Mr. Baldoni. And also that she told Mr. Heath on several occasions that an investigation needed to be conducted. Mr. Heath said, well, maybe she came to talk to me, but she didn't talk to me about an investigation. And I didn't say what she said I said. So then, God, that was a lot. Then Zeldin starts to ask a question, but it gets cut off. They break for lunch by the look of it, and they're coming back into the afternoon. So Zeldin's asking, Mr. Robbins, you were trying to summarize on a high level what your opinions are, not your sub-opinions. And the first one we said was that defendants violated standard practices and their own policies by failing to investigate harassment and retaliation allegations. Is that correct? Yes. And then the second one is that the investigation would have resulted in disciplinary remedial actions. Is that another big opinion? No, I don't have an opinion like that. You don't have an opinion like that? No. Okay, so I'm looking at the first page again, the penultimate paragraph, the last sentence. Further appropriate disciplinary remedial actions would be taken as a result of such investigations. Right. That's not saying that I have an opinion. Oh, God. Well, what is your report if it's not your flipping opinion? That's not saying that I have an opinion as to what actions should be taken. Hold on, I'm going to go back to the question. Then the second one is that the investigation would have resulted in disciplinary remedial actions. She doesn't say what disciplinary. She is literally quoting him. That there would be disciplinary remedial actions. She doesn't. The question doesn't specify what they would be. Okay, let's just go through his answer. This guy's an idiot. I've already formed that expert opinion. Right, that's not saying that I have an opinion as to what action should be taken, if any, because I don't know what an investigator would determine, and I am just saying that normally you take disciplinary and or remedial action, and so that was something that's available depending on what an investigator determined. And then the second opinion is that the studio violated. We're going to say that's not a major opinion. The first opinion is the major opinion, which is the defendants violated standard practices in their own policies by failing to investigate. Is that right? Yeah. The second one is that the studio violated the entertainment industry specific protocols. He says, I look at the first and second as you describe them to be part of the same thing. Okay. That's it. Taking steps to prevent harassment and retaliation from occurring, and I list the 4 steps, which you pointed out earlier, including investigating, and the intimacy protocols are part of preventing harassment and not retaliation so much, but harassment. And your third opinion, or maybe your second opinion then, is that the entertainment industry differs from most other industries and businesses with respect to issues concerning retaliation. Objection. Is that correct? Yes, and then I have an opinion about Miss Fromholz's opinion as well. Okay, and finally, you have an opinion about Miss Fromholz. We will do that last, okay? Whatever order you like. Thank you. In your report, you mentioned various incidents. We talked about some of those earlier. Your report also refers to a fat shaming incident. Do you recall that? Objection. Is that in the report? I believe you discussed that. I don't remember. Okay, we're now jumping pages. So Zeldin, correct. I don't know what the question is before that. It's not what she wrote. Sorry, it's not what he wrote. And then Zeldin corrects him. She. And then he says, "Oh my god," he says, "Sorry, oh, that was sexist." Oh my god. No, it was a fucking mistake. What is it with people? I suppose he's got to kind of do this whole bravado and oh my god, I misgendered her, now I'm sexist. Because he probably in his report somewhere wrote that Justin Baldoni did the same thing. That's speculation. I don't know that for sure. But he just seems that kind of petulant turd of a man, to be honest. I really don't like this guy. Right. Sorry, oh, that was sexist. But I would say it's reasonable to assume that it included no investigation. Was on the list of 17 things, but was there a requirement to hire a new producer? I don't remember the things that really aren't relevant to my opinion very much. Why is the 17-point list not relevant? Why does he not think the 17-point list is not relevant? I don't remember the things that really aren't relevant to my opinion very much, but so I don't remember one way or another. Since you're asking me, the answer is probably yes, but I don't remember it. Did the 17-point list include a requirement that Ange Giannetti be on the set? Yes. This was the same Ange Giannetti that you criticised for not having conducted any investigation, correct? No. Is it a different Ange Giannetti? Oh my god. Well, I mean, that's a point I've made myself, right? Is all the criticism that Ange Giannetti was apparently taken behind the scenes, which we now know about. Yet, why did Lively specify she wanted her on set at all times in the 17-point list? When she was, it's not just this guy criticizing Sony. It is specifically Ange Giannetti. You know, Ryan Reynolds did. WME did. They all like, oh yeah, well, you know, she went running to Ange Giannetti, and Ange Giannetti did nothing. It's like, but then Lively went on to demand that she be on set at all times to help keep the set safe. What? It's contradictory. That tickled me then. Is it a different Ange Giannetti? He says, no, I never criticised her for not conducting an investigation. I criticised Sony for not conducting an investigation. Well, who the fuck does he think Ange Giannetti works for? Who does he think that Lively was... Which Sony representative does he think Lively was disclosing her concerns to? Oh, my God. Zeldin, I see. And do you know whether she told anybody at Sony about the allegations that Miss Lively made? I don't know. But if she didn't, she should have. And I would criticise her for that. Oh my god, this guy is not... He's not read half of the shit he needs to read. Wow. This is like another version of Jennifer Freyd not reading Lively's PGA letter. when you got half the information and you write a dumbass report and it's about to enter one of the most public lawsuits ever, and it's going to tank your career. And I'm here for it. Zeldin, okay. One of the requirements was to give Alex Sachs more power. How does that have something to do with sexual harassment? Yes, exactly. I've been saying this. Objection. I don't think it necessarily does. No, it doesn't. I finally agree with this guy. I don't think each one of the 17 protections had to do with sexual harassment. Some did, some didn't. A boom. And then suddenly Zeldin has got this guy to switch sides from being a lively expert witness to being a Wayfarer expert witness. This is really good lawyering, by the way, to get this job well done by Zeldin, to be fair. She continues. How about the protection with regard to COVID? Did that have anything to do with sexual harassment? No. Did Lively and her team threaten Wayfarer and Sony that she would not return to complete the film unless they accepted the protections? Objection. Whether it was Lively or a team, I don't know, but that was what was communicated. And that's where that ends. So now I'm going to go to the smaller excerpt. Oh, here we are. That was a wild ride, though, wasn't it? Just before we start this one, like I feel like I'm gonna need to go away and process that. Oh, that expert was just a total douchebag. Okay, this is literally only a couple of pages, so we'll be through it in no time. And then I'll wrap up this video and do a separate one for his report, which should be a hoot. Okay, so we are part of the way through. We have read this, but I am going to go through it again just because it is so short. Okay, so he's part of the way through an answer are part of preventing harassment and not retaliation so much, but harassment. And your third opinion, or maybe your second opinion, then, is that the entertainment industry differs from most other industries and businesses with respect to issues concerning retaliation. Rosa objects. Is that correct? Yes. And then I have an opinion about Miss Fromholtz's opinion as well. Okay. And then and finally, you have an opinion about Miss Fromholtz. We will do that last, okay? Whatever order you like. Thank you. In your report, you mentioned various incidents. We talked about some of those earlier. Your report also refers to a fat shaming incident. Do you recall that? Objection. Is that in the report? I believe we discussed that. I don't remember. And then this page, we did not read this page, so we will go to this page. Okay, then Zeldin, footnote 34 on page 12. Oh my god, yeah, you should see. I can't wait to show you this guy's report. It's like 50%, main body text and 50% footnotes. I don't love footnote heavy reports. They have a specific purpose, and I feel like this guy just went over the top. Okay. He says, let's see. Yes, that I'm not saying anything about the incident other people than that. I'm not saying anything about the incident other than what people said was complained about or what people were upset about. Zeldin, is that a sexual harassment allegation? No. I have to what is it? Footnote 34 on page 12. Right. Because I already have it. I'll just go and check out that. What is that? 10, 11. Footnote 34. Further, by Mr. Baldoni, Miss Giannetti understood that Miss Lively was upset about a comment Mr. Baldoni made about Miss Lively's weight. Okay, so it's about the fat shaming crap. Okay. So he's asked, is that a sexual harassment allegation? No. So her own expert is saying that that Baldoni asking Saladino about Lively's weight is not sexual harassment. Got it. Rosa objects. Selden. Is the incident where Jamie Heath showed a video of his wife after the birth of their child, is that an incident of sexual harassment? Rosa objects form and scope beyond that expert. Selden says, go ahead. The expert. Obviously, I'm not forming opinions about whether something is or isn't harassment. In part, that would be a legal opinion, but it is an allegation of a potential violation of the company's policy, sure. And it is one that warrants an investigation, in your opinion? And we get a partial answer, yes, unless there was no dispute about. We don't know what he's recommending. I'm guessing it was whether you could see anything nude that was obviously nude about Natasha Heath, like the baby was crowning. Or whether Jamie Heath says, it was, that tender moment of them as a family after birth, which was the exact scene they depicted in the film subsequently. So that is the end of the that's all of this guy's deposition transcript. I recommend everyone go and make yourself a nice, cup of tea, take some aspirin or paracetamol, Tylenol, whatever you've got, and then just go and lie down for an hour in a dark room, and you'll feel much better. I will do the follow-up with his report because, yeah, now we've read all of that, like, heard his testimony talking about his report, I feel like, well, let's go through the report. Thank you for listening, and I will catch you at the next one.